Cameras on, my fellow board members. Lisa, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
All right. Welcome to the Village of Cottage Grove Village Board of Trustees meeting on Monday, February 16th, 2026. This is a virtual meeting due to the election being held tomorrow, so the Zoom link is at the top of the agenda. You can also tune in on our YouTube channel as well. It is 6:30, so I'll call the meeting to order. We have a quorum and the agenda was properly posted, so we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And like a good Girl Scout troop leader, I have a flag for you all. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, this is the public's appearances, the public's opportunity to speak. So this is the portion of the meeting for community members to share their comments or concerns, but please note that this isn't a dialogue between the village board. Each speaker has up to 3 minutes, and we'll use a timer. I don't think we'll put it on the screen tonight because that can be kind of distracting. I want to make sure you see your face. So I'll just keep track of it here. And we just ask that everyone please respect the rights and viewpoints of others. So because this is a virtual meeting, if you would like to speak, we're going to ask that you use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then you'll be allowed to unmute and give your comment. So if anyone would like to speak, you can do that, and we'll just pause here for that.
Cindy, I'm not seeing a raise hand function on my screen, so I don't know if some of the citizens are having trouble.
If you go under the react button on the bottom there, you can raise your hand.
Oh, perfect. Okay, it's a different viewpoint. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any hands, Cindy.
All right. We're going to move on then to number 5. So discuss and consider the minutes of the village board meeting from February 2nd, 2026. Those meeting minutes are linked in the agenda.
Murphy would make a motion to approve minutes as presented.
Severson, second.
All right, there's a motion by Murphy and a second by Severson. Any other discussion on the meeting minutes?
Just a question on the next items for next agenda. Do those carry over if they weren't listed? Because I know one of the items that I wanted listed was the flock camera conversation. So will those carry over automatically and be on the next agenda?
I think that's been on, I know I've had the discussion with Chief Gary, so it's on everyone's radar, but we can make sure to revisit that.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the meeting minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. We're going to move on to number 6, unfinished business, is discuss and consider the potential purchase of 107 East Cottage Grove Road in TID 9. And I think Kyle is on and will run us through this. There's 2 PDFs linked in the agenda here. And I will mention that our legal team did review this as well.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Hi, everybody. Filling in for Tom this evening. So what we had sent over, as Cindy mentioned, was 2 PDFs. This is follow-up to the letter of intent, which was discussed during previous meetings. We went back with the seller for the property to negotiate the best price and deal that we could for the village. And then the culmination of what we have before you today is the offer to purchase for your review. So just a few of the highlights to mention. The purchase price is at $350,000. Acceptance is set by March 18th. So that would be approval by the board tonight. And then we'll get that in the seller's hands as well for their review and sign off. Earnest money of $5,000, which is pretty typical, and again was agreed to in the letter of intent. 90 days after acceptance that the village has for their due diligence to review everything on the property. And within that 90 days, as long as everything looks okay, then at the end of that 90-day period, everything is locked into place. The closing is set for mid-November, November 18th. And during that time, the renter that's in the property currently would be vacating the property, taking all of their personal property as well. So again, after that 90 days, as long as everything looks good, then everything is locked, and we just kind of waited out until November. So that's the high level summary, all the documentation there, the standard state form that we've used in the past, as well as the addendums that we have.
And I'll open it up to questions from village board members.
Yeah, I guess I got a question. We talked about the letter of intent. We talked about valuation, and I had shared, my concerns with this. We're spending a lot of money on these properties to put them together, and we felt 300,000 is about what it would be worth on the open market, if that. And we had said 330, and so now it's 350. Plus, I see that the seller's not paying the commission, which is another 10,000. So essentially, instead of 300,000, it's costing the village 360, right?
Correct.
Paula's got her hand up.
Go ahead, Paula.
I too was a little not happy with the price increase. The bigger issue for me, and I do know that we've kind of already made that offer to purchase, and I know that, boards before us have kind of gone down this track of purchasing buildings in that area. So, I'd like to kind of compromise. I'm going to obviously follow through since the board went with this offer to purchase, but I would like, before we entertain the notion of purchasing more property, to have some public input. I think when we talked about rezoning that area to central business, and some of the citizens were pretty upset, that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that the public really hasn't had an opportunity to play a role in this and kind of voice their opinions. So I would like for us, before we entertain another property, to hold some public visioning sessions and some conversations, kind of like we talked about at the last meeting, about where's our downtown, what does that look like. So I just wanted to say that.
So I'll just, and maybe Rick can jump in. I know we had given specific direction, Kyle too, please weigh in, that the terms meet the board's direction that was given at the last meeting. And then Paula, in terms of the visioning exercises, those are all worked into the comprehensive plan revisions that are set to move forward this year still. So hopefully in the next couple of months, I know the RFP is out right now.
Yeah, and Cindy, I know we gave direction at the last board meeting. I certainly wasn't aligned with anything over 330, and that was kind of the starting point. And we didn't really talk about the seller not paying a commission, and obviously not closing till the 18th. So there's a number of things here, but again, I know we've spent millions of dollars on the other properties that are part of this situation, but I do concur with this notion of having some public hearings and discussing the vision for the future development, how that fits.
Well, they have also passed direction to Rudabush to continue the negotiations moving forward for some additional properties. So we would want clear direction from the board on whether that should be paused or not. And perhaps that's a future agenda item, which I will make note of to bring up at the future agenda items. But this is a discuss and consider for the purchase of 107 East Cottage Grove Road. Is there any other discussion on this?
So Kyle, you guys had talked to them about what we had proposed before, 330, in exchange for a lengthy closing out to November, and that was a no-go with the seller, I'm assuming.
Correct. 350 was the only number that they would take. I think we do have some flexibility if the village would want to move the closing date up. Their biggest concern was for their tenant, right? They want to make sure that they have adequate time for the tenant to find a new location. But in the original letter of intent, we said Q4. So potentially in October, or we can always go back and have discussions about a sooner closing date if that would be something the village wanted to pursue.
And they listed, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, Paula had her hand up.
I was just going to ask Cameron if he wouldn't mind taking a minute to explain the financing of this for the residents that are on the meeting right now.
Sure. So there'd be no intent to take out any debt for this property. So this property would be completely paid in cash. It is slightly advantageous for the village to not close on this property until November, as that's longer. That's a longer period of time that the village can sit on the cash that's located within TID 9. So no plans to finance. What we would try to do as far as a closing period is we want to work, if there's going to be training opportunities, we would want to work with our emergency responders and then do some restoration of that property, hopefully before the winter months start. I know it's a little bit of a tight turnaround, but making sure that the area is properly restored. Yeah.
And to be clear, the cash is TID 9 cash, which is for the public reinvestment of revenues from the Authentics apartments, which bring in about $900,000 per year.
Other questions from board members? Otherwise, this is a discuss and consider.
Rick's got his hand up.
I was just going to say my preference would be to take the actually close sort of in line with Cameron, close when there's no tenant. So if that's, it just makes it a cleaner transaction overall. So that would be my preference, I guess, as well.
Go ahead, Pete.
It's kind of clunky with these controls here, but anyway, I guess assuming we were to go forward with this, what would the plan be? Like, would we demolish the property? What is the cost for that? We're certainly not going to be residential landlords. It's hard enough being a commercial landlord in one of the two properties that were already purchased for multiple millions, right? So what is the plan and where are we going with this building if we do purchase it?
Just demolition cost. So right now we're working on getting quotes for a more aggregated approach. So we have a cost per parcel. We have results back from one company, the company who did the corner, but we want to get a couple more back. But it would be probably between $20,000 and $24,000 to actually demolish, and another $5,000 to $10,000 to restore the property in the interim. My guess is, based off of prior direction, that the board would be interested in letting EMS and fire do training. That obviously doesn't have any cost to us, but just that additional coordination with that group.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Cameron if the TID would pay for that demolition then? Correct.
It would because the intent there would be to get that site ready for the redevelopment eventually once those parcels are aggregated.
So you're really looking at
any cost associated with, like, if the fire department EMS went out, would not be TID eligible, but the actual demolition would be.
So very similar to what just happened this previous fall.
Correct.
All right, any other comments or questions on the offer to purchase? Pete?
Yeah, I guess the one question I would have is, in typical residential real estate, the seller pays the commissions. And I guess in this case, we didn't have clear direction. And again, it's $10,000. And I guess the question to Kyle would be, what is the opportunity to go back to them and have the seller pay the commission, which is customary for residential real estate transactions?
No, good question. That was one of the first discussions that we had with the seller, Pete, was that, as you mentioned, that it would be very typical for the seller to pay the commission. And that's what we had in our original discussions with them before we even brought the LOI to the board. And that was another one of the seller's hard stopping points, that they said, no, they would not be paying the commission. And if they would, then they wouldn't be selling the property.
other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Murphy will move approval of the purchase of 107 East Cottage Grove Road in TID 9 as presented.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Murphy, second by Stoa. Lisa, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Yes.
Just a
Benzo,
comment in the discussion, right? So discussion after that, I guess, just reinforcing what I'd said before. I mean, without a good, clear plan, begin with the end in mind. I struggle a little bit with where we're going with TID 9 money, even though it's TID 9 money, it's village and the other taxing districts' money in the end if it's not spent, right? But again, it comes down to we're so deep into this that one property when this opportunity is in front of us. So I'm struggling opposing it, but at the end of the day, I do believe that we need to have more discussion before we plow down more purchases in this area.
I have that noted for future agenda items. All right, there is the motion and seconds. Any other discussion on this? Otherwise, go ahead, Lisa.
Benzo,
Okay. The host had me muted. My vote is no. I believe that we need further discussion.
Dahl,
Aye.
Cal Nelson,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Severson,
Aye.
and Stoa.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Moving on to number 6B, discuss and consider board member involvement participation in PAA's fire and EMS study.
So I requested this agenda item after I learned that the town board, the entire board, had been able to do the walkthrough of the existing emergency services building. And I was not aware that that was even a thing. And so I'd like to have the same opportunities that the town board is having. So if they notice the public meeting, right, and they're able to attend, I would hope that we would have that same opportunity. I know that village, in the past that it's typically just been the village president and administrator, but I think I certainly would have liked to have been there. I've been around that building for over 20 years. I would have liked to heard the conversations, maybe seen what has been pointed out that is, like a flaw or what the needs are. I have some ideas and opinions on the space in the basement of that building that I feel hasn't been well utilized from an efficiency standpoint. So I guess I had some conversation with Matt via email and wanted to have this agenda item so that we maybe have an idea going forward if we are all able to have those opportunities.
Go ahead, Heidi.
Yep, thank you. During our last facility study, when we looked at all village facilities before we ended up with the recommendation that the police needed the greatest need and then other departments could backfill in their space, we did go after the architects had the discussion with all of the staff about the future staffing needs, and we did have a tour of kind of the study findings to go over like what areas were going to need growth and other things with the buildings that needed to be repaired in the future. So I think that was really helpful. It was an open to the public meeting to talk about kind of the findings of the study. And so I think that would be a really, helpful thing to really see in person. I wasn't expecting either to have it be noticed by the town at this early stage, rather than after the experts talk through the findings, that would be an appropriate time. So I guess that kind of took me by surprise too.
We had the kickoff meeting with the with PA, and the intent was not to leave the village board out of this, and I think they weren't expecting necessarily the town board to notice a meeting and use it as kind of a public meeting. And we definitely, if we do, we're going to have to make sure that we're ready to handle, the public going through those spaces as well, as part of the public meeting. All village board members, I was going to give an update at the end, but I can do it now. In the next maybe week or so, we'll be receiving a survey to fill out for PA. There is going to be a comment box at the end, so you can actually write written comments after you fill the survey out. And then if you would like to have a one-on-one with PA, make note of that as well, and then they will sit down with you or call you and make sure that you're interviewed one-on-one. So Paula, that might be a good way to get some one-on-one time with them to make sure that you can kind of hammer home some of your points too.
No, that's great, and I appreciate that. And even just a heads up, to the village board when these things are happening, and then that way someone can express interest if they'd like to be a part of it. I think that would be very helpful and transparent to the whole board. So just wanted to have this as a discussion item.
And I think if anyone feels like they need a walkthrough with the chiefs, they'd be more than happy to take you through the building as well, and kind of point out, the current space and what they kind of envision for it, and have that conversation kind of one-on-one with you all too. So direction from this item is to make sure keeping everyone in the loop in real time a little bit better. I can certainly do that.
Thank you.
And I'll speak to just oh, sorry, Cindy, I didn't have my hand up. I did it in we didn't have I don't know the timing of when we knew the date or time, but I did have mention in a monthly briefing that there would be a site visit in February. So, but of course we didn't realize that there was interest, and when the board discussed, scope of the study, it was really just the stakeholder feedback survey, discussions with consultant type discussion.
But having this, thank you for putting this on the agenda, because it gives us some clear direction to make sure we communicate properly. Heidi?
Is it I can't remember if it was part of the deliverables that we would have like an in-person tour of the findings like we did with the previous facility study, or is that something we can talk to PA if there's interest with the boards to have that?
I don't think it's in the deliverables, but I think that's a good idea. So the idea is they're going to finish probably in 4 months, and we'll have an additional joint town board meeting so that they can present their findings to us. But maybe that's also kind of part of it, especially if there tends to be a lot of outcomes that have to do with the current station. I think it would be a good idea for all of us to kind of see it in real time and have that conversation in person. Any other discussion on this item? Okay. Every time someone moves, my whole screen bounces around, so I want to make sure I don't miss anybody. We're going to move on to number 7, new business. Discuss and consider resolution 2026-04, authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for a sale of not to exceed 20.355 million general obligation promissory notes series 2026A. So this is, and I think we have Ellers on the call here. This is kind of an accumulation of the prioritization process that occurred last June, the financial management plan that we approved in September, budget review, budget workshop, approval of the entire budget in October and November. And so this is kind of working forward with all the projects coming up in 2026. So I'll turn it over to Greg from Ellers.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to share my screen and just bring up some of the documents that you had in your packet for easy reference. As was mentioned, the agenda item is consideration of a parameters resolution. This is really the authorization to proceed with the financing, which would be awarded subject to certain financial parameters being satisfied, which I'll summarize in a few moments. But the general purpose, we have a detailed listing of project costs, but what's included is this year's capital improvement plan projects, which broadly consists of street and trail improvements, water and sewer improvements, park improvements, police station project, and then just ongoing vehicle and equipment acquisitions for various departments within the village. Included in your packet and accompanying the resolution was our pre-sale report that includes our financial analysis for this proposed financing. So I'm just going to walk through the financial exhibits that supplement this report. So we'll start with the village's existing general obligation debt profile. So table 1 summarizes your existing levy for debt service before we look at the impact of this proposed financing. The far left-hand side is the total principal and interest payments that the village makes annually on its existing general obligation debt. And then the village budgets several non-levy revenue sources to repay some of that debt, most notably revenues from TID districts 5, 6, and 9, and then revenues from the sewer utility and the water utility. And then this year there was some fund balances applied as well from various funds. So the village's levy for debt service this year was about $1,835,000. So then this net tax levy shows the existing levy for debt that's already outstanding. Then we'll look at the impact of this proposed notes in a few moments. In terms of the dollar amount that's being borrowed, it's about $20,214,000 project cost. So here it lists the dollar amount for each improvement and each project. And then we identify the fund and repayment source for the debt. So any projects attributable to the water utility will be repaid by water revenues, sewer projects by sewer revenues, and then the remainder of the debt service will be supported by the village's property tax levy for debt service. Sources and uses, the not to exceed amount that you're borrowing in the resolution is $20,355,000. And then we allocate the debt by repayment sources. So we have that debt service for future budgeting purposes. In terms of the estimated debt service schedule that's shown here in table 4, one of the financial parameters for this issue, in addition to not exceeding $20,355,000 of debt, is that the true interest cost when the notes are sold cannot exceed 4.21%. So in essence, what that means is that in order to award the sale, the interest rates can't be any higher than what we are showing here in our analysis. These interest rates are conservative. They're about 50 basis points. 1 basis point is 0.01%. So these are about 0.5% higher than what we're seeing in the market presently. So if the notes were sold today, the total debt service cost would be less than what we're showing here. So we've typically built in a cushion, but the sale to be awarded cannot exceed 4.21% true interest cost. So in terms of the overall financial impact, so when we take the village's existing levy for debt service, we show the gross principal and interest payment for the notes, the abatement and application of water and sewer revenues to support their share of respective debt. You'll see the levy change for debt service going forward for these projects. This is right in line with the financial management plan that was presented to the village board last September. So the levy impact is very comparable to what you saw prior to kind of going through the budget process last year. Then we show how your tax rate for debt service will change. You're at about $1.55 per thousand presently. That's projected to be about $1.88 per thousand for the 2027 budget. So the impact of these notes for every $100,000 of value is about $65 per year in 2027. In terms of the village's general obligation debt capacity, we kind of do this on a year-end projection. So at the end of fiscal year 2025, the village was at about 41% of its debt limit, projecting some growth in equalized value by the end of 2026. We're projecting with this financing, the village will be at 50% of its debt limit, which leaves about $48 million of borrowing capacity for future projects. Since a portion of this debt service is repaid by utility revenues, we prepare what's kind of called a all-in debt service coverage calculation. that looks at existing debt and then proposed geo debt repaid by water revenues in this instance. So what this kind of shows is that, you know, the debt service coverage ratio for the water utility is projected to start getting under 1, which just kind of means that there'll likely to be some future look at water rates, which I know is anticipated going forward, just to kind of make sure that you continue to have sufficient funds for debt service coverage, but also maintaining long-term operations of the water utility as well. And then the sewer utility coverage, the amount being repaid here by the sewer utility is relatively small, ranges from $15,000 to $27,000 per year. So you have strong coverage under the existing revenue structure of the sewer utilities to support this debt. So as I mentioned, the action item is the agenda. The agenda is the parameters resolution. There are several parameters. Kind of the ones that, you know, are usually most applicable are the not to exceed, the 20,355,000. Again, the true interest cost cannot exceed 4.21%. We set bidding parameters for the underwriters that bid, just to kind of get enough attractive bids, but also to get the fiscal impact that we want. And then when we get the final sale results, we often adjust the amortization schedule based on the final rates. And so we have some parameters that provide the guidance for making those adjustments. So we get the levy impact that's similar to what's in the pre-sale report. So in terms of the timeline, where we go from here, we're kind of at the February 16th date here, which is the consideration of the parameters resolution. Resolution delegates authority to either the village administrator or the finance director to accept the bid results on behalf of the village board if those parameters are satisfied. The village has used this sale method in the past. One of the advantages of this is that we can schedule the sale on a date where there's typically less sales within the market, since you routinely meet on Mondays, Tuesdays in particular are very common meeting nights for municipalities in Wisconsin. So if you have the sale on a regular meeting day, you can have more competition, and usually spring is where we see heavier volume. So we're kind of targeting March 24th as the sale date, which gives us the, you know, on a day that there's likely less activity in the bond market, less sales to compete with, which can help with bidding, then you would get the estimated close of funds by April 16th. So again, the parameters resolution will kind of set all this in motion to proceed with the financing, which will be concluded next month and then closing in mid-April. So that's the overview of the financing plan. I'm happy to answer questions, or if staff has anything they want to interject, they certainly can as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Cameron, do you have anything to add?
No, I have nothing else to add. Greg did a nice job, just consistent with the financial management plan. I sent some additional kind of notes out to the board, kind of detailing, you know, how the village has issued debt in the past, you know, a little bit of more of a reliance on geo debt compared to revenue bonds. Pointed out 2 specific examples with Windsor and DeForest, with comparable communities and what their debt limit percentages into our comparison. So just wanted to make sure that the board had, you know, some supplemental information when reviewing this tonight.
I'll open it up to questions from the village board. Otherwise, yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, I don't really have a question, just a couple comments. I guess as you go through this, did I pick up it's going to be $439,000 about to actually issue this debt? Was that the right number, Greg?
Yes, that includes the underwriter's discount, which is the compensation that the winning underwriter, that can change. That's an estimate in terms of what their compensation is. That includes rating fee with Standard & Poor's, bond counsel and disclosure counsel, which is Corals and Brady, and then our compensation as the village's municipal advisor. So all of those are contingent on the financing actually occurring. If for some reason the financing doesn't occur, you wouldn't incur any of those expenses.
Right, gotcha. I mean, it's just a ton of money, and it just amplifies kind of the impact of the more and more debt we take on. I mean, I know you said we're comparing to other municipalities, and you know, being this far in debt, you know, it's pretty it's not uncommon. I find it disturbing that we're going to spend $9.8 million in interest during the recovery of these notes. Again, we went through the police station. It's been approved. I don't think there's a whole lot here that we can change. We've sort of set the table and it aligns with the financial management plan. But I guess I just want to reinforce, and it goes back to some of the fees that with public service fees we talked about, is this is an example of the cost of growth, right? The police station itself, if we didn't build 800 apartment units over the last 5 years or since 2020, there's a possibility that the magnitude of this debt wouldn't be there. The same thing goes with the police equipment, the fire equipment, the public works, and the parks funding. We're gonna fund or issue debt for $700,000 worth of service elements to those departments, which, again, it's all part of where we ended up. But again, it comes down to that growth in and of itself doesn't generate infinite amounts of revenue that pays for the service costs that go up. And that's something we need to be careful moving forward. And we've talked about it. And I just want to reinforce that this $20 million is a result of the growth that's happened over the last 5 to 6 years. And this is the cost of the services that are necessary for our community. And we need to do it. And I'm not saying I'm against it at this point, but the cake is baked, and we've actually approved a lot of these things in other elements of our proceedings. But again, this is the culmination of it. And to spend $9.8 million worth of interest, which is lost money as far as any benefit the village gets, is disturbing. And I understand debt allows us to do things that we otherwise couldn't, but this is a massive number, and it's unprecedented in the history of Cottage Grove.
Renee has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple questions too for you, Greg. I guess I'm curious, at what percentage does Ehlers feel that we've reached our capacity for a community the size of ours? At what percentage, like 50%, 60%, before it's really going to start taking even a larger strain? And Pete, I share many of your concerns of when is this going to start impacting future operating budgets and other staffing needs, public safety cost, or other core services?
So I think my answer is kind of two-part, because I mean there's really kind of two ways to kind of look at your question. So one is, your general obligation borrowing capacity. I mean, what you can legally borrow is one half of the question. The second half of the equation is how much are you comfortable repaying and what's the fiscal impact. So in terms of the first half, in terms of what you borrow, I think we generally like to, what we've said before is we wouldn't want that to exceed anywhere between 75 and 80% of your borrowing capacity. That's not a recommendation to borrow that amount. That's just kind of an upper level from a borrowing capacity standpoint. But the more important question is, just because you can borrow it doesn't mean you should. So then it comes down to what's the appropriate fiscal impact, and striking that balance between investment in your infrastructure and funding on ongoing day-to-day services. So, you are, as you're all well aware, restricted in terms of how much revenue raising capability you have for operational services under levy limits. So that does give you kind of an additional mechanism to fund those types of projects, but affordability is central to those considerations.
Yeah, Greg, one thing I just want to make very clear, because I have this question all the time is, we're not like the federal government. We are not taking debt out to cover any operating expenses to make payroll. Everything is backed by an asset. Greg probably wouldn't look at that very favorable if we were needing to take out debt to make payroll or to make get from one tax collection to the next. So Renee, sorry for cutting you off, but you can, if you have any other questions, just wanted to make sure that was added.
Yeah, yes, thank you for that, Cameron. I guess, from Greg, your standpoint, so a village our size, would you consider that this is a conservative, a moderate, or aggressive way for the village to proceed with the debt? And with that being said, are we, you know, at the rate of our growth, which Pete had mentioned too, is that our rate of our growth has just been exponential. Are we looking at adding a levy? I mean, what are the chances in the next 3 to 5 years of having to do a levy?
I mean, I think in terms of, this goes back to kind of the annual planning and prioritization that the village board goes through each year. So with the financial management plan that we typically do at the start of your budget process, that really looks out at 5 years, both for operations and capital, to help identify what that fiscal impact is going to be, to help prioritization and kind of strike that appropriate balance. Not every community goes through that process. I don't want to kind of just make it sound like it's just standard course of practice. It has been in Cottage Grove, to all of your credits, but that isn't necessarily something every community chooses to undertake. I mean, I think in terms of your CIP process and your prioritization process as well, your approach that you use there is very diligent as well in terms of ranking projects and prioritizing things. So, it's all, challenging and difficult choices in terms of deciding which projects you move forward with. But I think when you do it in that long range context, you're positioning yourself to make stronger decisions. And if you're just reacting to things on just a 12 to 18 month basis. So my general recommendation is to keep doing what you're doing, because I think that's going to better position yourself, and the village is in stable financial condition. I mean, in terms of, tax levies and impacts, those are all extremely important considerations, but the village is also very healthy, and you're in position to have these discussions, whereas that isn't universally true either with every municipality.
Okay. Paula,
What another question, sorry, and then I'll stop asking questions for the moment. Another question, Greg, thank you for that answer. But what are some warning flags or some warning signs that our community is really headed towards an operational referendum?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of the biggest financial decision that communities in Wisconsin are facing, is really looking at operational referendums. And I think the reason that is becoming front and center is largely due to the passage of time. I mean, levy limits have been in place since 2005. And if you kind of track inflationary trends statewide compared to kind of net new construction and your ability to increase the levy, many communities have now, reached the point where they have that gap to fund their day-to-day services, and maintain services cannot continue to be funded under the current levy limit restrictions. And so again, that's where your long-range planning comes into play, because it helps kind of prioritize that, and you can see that kind of coming. So it's very much the main challenge facing municipalities throughout Wisconsin, is communities that maybe still have that levy limit flexibility are starting to see that erode over the coming years. And again, it's all about kind of prioritization, but maintaining that long range forecast so you have time to plan for that as opposed to reacting to it.
Yeah, yes, I appreciate that. But what do you see in the village's financial outlook, to answer that more specifically? I know that, for generally speaking, you gave a very succinct overview, but looking at the village specifically.
Yeah, so I mean, when we look at, and I mean, that's what we look at in the financial management plan every year, is in terms of where kind of that levy limit, gap, may exist. And so, that has kind of changed in terms of where that pressure point has been, as different priorities and your numbers come into focus each particular year. So, I think we'll take another look at it when we go through the fall and kind of see where you're at in terms of that projection. But I mean, that's been front and center throughout the years. And, we haven't been at the point where you've had to do that operational levy limit forecast yet, but that still remains front and center in terms of when that situation may exist. So that's really what we look at every year with the financial management plan, when we have your next year's round of data.
Yeah, Greg, to your your point, Greg, the biggest drivers for the village is public safety. Public safety costs. Not only are you talking about the increase just in benefits and things, the demand on public safety. So public safety, EMS, fire, police is costing more. That cost is increasing much higher than what inflation is. As there's less people who are becoming paramedics, as there is a tighter labor market for getting police officers in. So that's something that we focus on. And so really what we do as a community that I found as a benefit is that financial management plan gives you a warning before there is an issue. And so every year, taking that 1 to 5 years and really, working on that 3, 4, and 5 year out. If the problem is already next year, most of the time it's too late to make significant changes. When I'm looking at it and working with us at Ellers, we're going 3 to 5 years out. And how are we structuring? Okay, if our population is growing a little bit, how do we get another officer hired? How does EMS fit another paramedic in the equation? Are we going to need additional plow equipment related to additional miles of roads? So from an operating perspective, the financial management plan is a 2 to 3 kind of months process where Greg and I and Cassie kind of go back and forth and making sure we're refining that and predicting our operating expenses. But from a debt perspective, because we're able to take an unlimited debt adjustment up to our statutory limit, taking out debt, unless you're talking about a tax impact, there's really no red flags because we're literally able to levy whatever our debt service payment is. Now, I've said this in previous capital prioritization plans, because of the rate that the village is growing, doesn't mean we should aim to stay at 60% of our debt limit. Because one year, if we add $100 million in net new construction, that doesn't mean we should spend the capacity that was generated. And so what I'm hearing kind of tonight is we need to make sure that our capital prioritization process is in alignment. If we still feel those parameters maybe need some tweaking to get a desired result. So if the village's desired result is to be no more than 40% or 50%, we should be adjusting what those guidelines are so that when the board members are grading those projects, we can make sure that we're fitting those priorities. Another kind of thing with the capital plan that we are doing is a lot of other communities are facing these issues, but because they don't do robust planning like this, they don't realize the capital stack that they have. And so a good comparability is, in the infrastructure footnote of the financial statements, you'll see a vast majority of the community having their street lines being over 50% depreciated. And that all that really means is, that community chose not to replace as much roads as they probably should to from a replacement perspective. So we do have a very aggressive infrastructure replacement plan in place with the $1 million of road improvements on an annual basis and $1 million of equipment. That is a very aggressive replacement plan to kind of catch up on some of the deferred maintenance.
Another question, I'm sorry.
I want to give Paula, we'll come back to you, Renee. Paula's had her hand up for a really long time, her arm's tired. And then Heidi, I do see you too, and then we'll come back to you, Renee.
Thank you. It was fine. You could have let her go yet, but just a couple things. So I think from my perspective, what I do for my day job, working in financial wellness, debt makes me queasy, right? And I would never advise someone to carry 6 times the amount of debt that they have for every dollar of revenue that they have. And that's kind of where this leaves us. That being said, though, I also want to acknowledge that I'm part of the reason we're taking on this 20,000 or 20 million because of my vote with the police station. Obviously a lot of that was done before I got on the board, but I still voted for the final improvement. So I just want to acknowledge that. I think though, however, because I feel that great responsibility, I want to play a very active role in helping us reduce our debt. And so one of the things I'm going to ask at the end of the meeting for a future agenda item is to create a debt reduction task force. That's kind of like an ad hoc committee that really, gets to the work of, trying to increase revenue and reduce debt, right? To get that down, and maybe even looking at our spending, looking for efficiencies. And I'm ready to roll my sleeves up and do that kind of work. I mean, that's what I do for my day job. So I'm going to vote for it. It makes me queasy, but I also really want to get super proactive about trying to get it paid down as soon as we can. That's all I wanted to say.
Heidi.
Thank you. Just looking over this capital improvement plan that we approved last year for the projects and thinking about, what this debt goes to, to maintain in our village, and talking about the Ollie Street reconstruction and water looping saves maintenance of our system. And we have vehicles that are getting more expensive to maintain than buy, and street maintenance. If a street becomes too poorly maintained, it costs a lot more to rehab it later down the line rather than staying on top of our maintenance plan. And so I guess my question kind of comes back to how else does a municipality pay for a $1 million snowplow or the street maintenance if we're not taking out debt? I'm thinking, do we overtax people and save up to do these projects in the future? Do you go to like a referendum every year and hope that your neighbors vote to repave your street? Like, what are the alternatives? Of course, you can seek grant money, which we're doing and will continue to do to help reduce the impact. And like, I guess my question then would be for Greg, Cameron, Matt, like, what are the other ways that a municipality can pay for things if they're not taking out debt?
I'll let Greg or Cameron jump in on that, but I first want to say that, I mean, the issue here is really the state's levy limits, because they don't give us any ability to increase our operating levy, but for new construction, i.e. growth. So we don't get to increase even with inflation unless we're growing. So that leaves the only alternatives to either cut services or go to referendum. With that, it also doesn't give us room to even do what Heidi was suggesting there. Even if we couldn't tax to save, because we don't have the room in the levy. So that would be a referendum. So, Greg, feel free to jump in, but that's really where the state doesn't really give us any options. They exempt debt. So they're basically saying that's your solution for capital. And on the operating side, your solution is to grow or go to referendum or cut services. That's it. Pretty simple.
So Matt, maybe this is more of a question off of what you just said, Matt. So we've recently, or you've mentioned at recent meetings that with the TID, I think it's TID 9 that's closing, that there'll be roughly about $1,300 per household that's going to be realized in savings that's actually going to be going to the property owners. So as the levy is not going up, but development is. So new developments, as they continue in our village, are we generating enough revenue to cover these services? Or are we using the existing tax base to make these numbers work? This kind of goes off of what your comment, Matt. So either Matt or Greg, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I can start, and Greg and Cameron, feel free to jump in. Just a little, it is TID 5, Renee, but you're right, the closure there. That's a projected, based on our financial management plan, and with that closure, about a $1,300 tax decrease for the average home for this coming year. And that's due to kind of the 15 to 20 year investment and growth in a TIF district and that closing. And there isn't really separated tax bases as far as existing and new taxes. It's all one and the same, and all, without the growth, the taxes would be going up even more. I mean, there's no way around it. And without it, again, we're either cutting services or we're going to referendum. And if you go to referendum and you don't grow, then taxes will be going up even more because you won't have the tax base to spread it around to. So.
All right, we've got hands lining the screen now. We got Heidi and then Paula and then Pete.
I guess I just wanted to go back to my question because
The revenue
get an
question, yeah.
opportunity to hear an answer of like, what are the other ways that municipalities can pay for things if they don't take out debt?
So one other thing, Heidi, that we can do, and actually it's, in my opinion, the least cost-effective way to do is issues when we redo a street or sidewalk, we could specially assess the property owners for those improvements. That's a lengthy process each time you do that. And what ends up happening is each individual homeowners get large assessments when we go by and do road or street infrastructure. And really what the village decided 3 years ago, JJ brought it forward, JJ and Brian brought it forward, that these are community assets, the roadways and sidewalks. And instead of one person getting, a 5-10 grand assessment, it makes more sense to invest
I can't hear Cameron. Can anybody else?
Yep, I'm seeing here nods.
I can hear Cameron, okay?
Obviously, Heidi, there's obviously grants available. So Kyla pretty aggressively applied for some grant funding this past year in the LREP program, and making sure that when we're having efficiencies and holding the vendors accountable who are doing the road replacements, stretching those dollars as far as possible. As far as really other revenue, there's not a ton else out there. As far as park projects, I've seen communities do extensive fundraising for those projects. Typically they have to be X% funded, private funded, before the municipality will come in and cover the rest of it. But that's really a community decision.
Right, go ahead, Paula.
Thank you. Just in response to the conversation about what else can we do, I think, Matt used the terminology cut services. Well, I think cut expenses would be a better word to use, because certainly there are things that we can look at trying to find efficiencies without necessarily impacting services. The other thing that would make a big impact, which is going to be, I think, on our next agenda item or next meeting, is a law enforcement impact fee. So, Ellers put that report together that basically said over 50% of the police project is due to growth, and that up to $7 million of that project cost can be attributed to growth. And so one of the ways we can cut our debt and what we're taking out today and pay it down faster is through that impact fee. So I think there are other things besides just going to referendum or just growing, right? I think, and again, having a debt reduction task force made up of board members and citizens, could find some creativity, right? And kind of dig into these things. And maybe, citizens have a view of something that we haven't even thought of, right? Like, so there's more than just those two options. And I just kind of wanted to be clear about that.
Go ahead, Pete.
I don't know what was going on there. There was a lot of crackling going on. I don't know if that was...
Paul, I think that might have been your microphone. It sounded like you were tap dancing a little bit.
It did. It was crackling a lot.
Sorry.
Yeah, I guess, to Heidi's point, we need to fix the roads. We need to take care of our infrastructure. I'm not suggesting that we would not do that. I think that the disturbing part to me is that this debt in and of itself is going to cost $9.8 million worth of interest, which could be 9 years worth of road improvements. It could be a lot of things. So there's this balance between advanced spending versus paced spending. And I think I'm in complete alignment with Paul in the sense that we need to control spending in conjunction with some of the other things that we talked about here. I mean, at the end of the day, the police station is a function, or a broad majority of it is a result of the growth. And that growth, there was no impact fee at the time. And at the end of the day, Matt, you said we need to grow, otherwise taxes will go up. Well, if we wouldn't have grown, taxes probably would have gone up at the rate of inflation, and taxes have gone up faster than the rate of inflation. So there is definitely, some truth between both lines there. But I think at the end of the day, controlling spending is absolutely critical. I think this debt issuance, unfortunately, is something that we're going to need to move forward with. I don't want to vote for it, but I think in light of the growth that's forced us into making sure that we've got the public services that we need to take care of our residents is absolutely critical.
Matt, go ahead.
Thanks. Paula, you're correct that digging in on efficiencies and lowering spending, that will help, and would help for a year or two, but eventually you can only cut so much, and then we will have to reduce services or grow, because that's the only option that the state gives us, or go to referendum and have an operating increase.
So the take home here is to everyone email our state representatives. Any other comments about this?
I just got one thing.
Yeah, go
Cindy,
ahead.
one comment. I just from the follow from the debt task force perspective, one just thing I would caution on that is a lot of our debt is scheduled with maturity dates, and possibly don't have callable features. So I think to achieve what you're looking for, setting better parameters on the capital prioritization, and setting goals on, okay, we want to be at X percentage of our debt by this year, X percentage of our debt by that year. I think that's going to achieve what you're looking to. And so while if the village on the March 2nd meeting chooses to go through the public or the law enforcement impact fee, what that will do is when we collect those fees, that won't reduce that debt, but it will reduce what we have to levy to pay for those fees. And so really, I think when we're kicking off those meetings in April, kind of post-election with the capital prioritization process, I think it would be really good to get some feedback on what is a tolerable both, tax increase and debt percentage perspective, because we through planning can get those results. We have been basing off of capital financing and capital replacement based off of the parameters that have kind of been in place over the last couple of years.
Can I just ask you for clarification? So are you saying all of our notes have a pre-payment penalty?
They don't have a prepayment penalty. They're all callable with a call date at some point that's identified for each debt issue. So, if you do have excess revenues at some point in the future and that call date comes, you can pay down a portion or all of the remaining principal outstanding on that issue. You can also, a call date is also when you have the opportunity to refinance if market conditions are favorable. So all your geodebt issues have a call feature. It's just a matter of when.
So I saw that in this issuance that these are callable. What you're saying is there are certain call dates, and is there a penalty to prepay?
No, once you reach the call date, there is no penalty to prepay.
So you reach the call date, anytime after that call date, they can be repaid, not up into that date, and it's not just on that date, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it's any date after the call date is reached. There's no prepayment penalty.
All right. Any other discussion? Otherwise, this is discuss and consider.
Murphy will move approval of the resolution as presented.
Kelm Nelson will second. All right, there's a motion and second. Any other discussion on this item? Otherwise, we'll roll call vote. Lisa?
Benzo,
I reluctantly have to agree. I don't see any other way out of it at this point. I appreciate Paula's suggestion, and I look forward to hopefully we can discuss that later. So long answer to aye.
Dahl,
Aye.
Cal Nelson,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Severson,
Aye.
Stoa,
No.
All right, motion carries. We are going to move on to, I've been doodling all over my paper here. New business B, discuss and consider the rules governing teleconferences and virtual attendance at meetings. This was, I think, first written in response to kind of going virtual during COVID, and there were a couple adjustments made by staff after our last meeting. And those red line corrections or additions were sent out, and what you see is the final version here. Any comments or questions? Otherwise, it is a discuss and consider.
I would move approval of the draft rules governing teleconferences and virtual attendance at meetings.
Murphy will second. Oh,
Lisa, you can choose one. I think it was Murphy. You got it first. Any other discussion on this?
Yeah, I guess I just have one question, Cindy. So, the issue that we had a couple weeks ago in terms of the disruption of the meeting, was there any investigation in terms of the video conferencing tools and or ability to squelch because like here you can put your hand up or you take your mic off and you can talk, and I think we've been pretty good about trying to speak in turn, but is there any features that we can utilize to allow you as the moderator to enable the speakers or anybody so that we can avoid that level of disruption, which was disturbing?
So we did. So everyone that is a village trustee or staff right now is a co-host on the meeting, so they're able to. That's why you can raise your hand and you can unmute yourself and you can speak, and you can turn your screen on. Everyone else doesn't have that ability, so you can't share your screen, you can't speak out of turn. So we hopefully have a little bit more protection during meetings.
Okay, thank you. That was what I was looking for. I didn't see it in that the document and or any of the other communication. So that's fantastic. So thank you for that.
And I think as technology changes, if we need to change platforms or different types of features on Zoom, we can absolutely do that as well. All right, this is a discuss and consider.
we have a motion and a second, so you ready for a roll
I
call?
cannot even paying attention. Okay.
Otherwise, I'd make a motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. And I didn't even do the roll call. I'm all thrown off now. Okay, we're going to move on to reports from village boards, commissions, and committees. Utility Commission is up first. Chris.
Yeah, we met on February 11th, Wednesday at 5 p.m. There were no public appearances. We approved the previous minutes. We approved the bills. We discussed and considered the lease agreement with UpNet. We added an auto renew term, applied an inflation index, and we adjusted the time frame for termination notice. And then we approved that. We talked about the Gaston and TT water main looping update. There should be a bid this week. We sent letters to adjacent property owners to see if they wanted us to stub out, and we ended up deciding not to include that in the bid. The Violet Road sanitary sewer repair update. I'd like to get a soil boring, and they're recommending pushing it to 2027 to hopefully be able to group that in with some other projects to try to get some economies of scale on that. We talked about the impact fee study as far as the water and sewer portions of the impact fees. The director's reports. Let me just open that so I know what I'm referring to here. They did a 2026 meter inventory and restocked some meters. There's no updates from Heyday so far. They had a pre-meeting for well 2 rehabilitation. There's a late summer, early fall, hopefully getting started on that. They deferred portion of the borrowing to reduce cost for that. And the farm interceptor project, the pipe is hopefully going to be in by the end of this week. Future agenda items for our next March meeting, talk about Gaston Loop bids and going over the 2025 financials for water sewer. And then we adjourned right at about 5:30.
Heidi has her hand up.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, Chris, for your overview. I was wondering, we aren't talking about, we're gonna have the presentation on the impact fees next month. So will the utility commission's comments be like looped into that, or did they have any? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I will be summarizing the feedback provided by the utility commission on that meeting date. So to just update on that, we posted the public hearing that will be in the paper on Thursday. Also on Thursday, we'll have the 2 public meetings, and all of that feedback will be shared on the 2nd.
Great.
Any other comments or questions for utility commission? Otherwise, you can roll it right into Public Works, Properties, and Sustainability Committee.
All right, we met on Wednesday. We gavelled in at about 5:36, as I recall. No public appearances, approved the minutes. We talked about the 2026 street and ped project as approved in the 2025 budget. The bid should be going out this week. We talked about the DNR grant for street sweeper for staff direction. There's a potential to defray some costs from a new street sweeper. I asked if they make street sweeper / leaf vac trucks, and apparently they don't. So that's a bummer. We talked about right-of-way permit for staff direction. The village's right-of-way ordinances need a bit of a cleanup. There's currently no fee. Neighboring communities do have a fee, so we're gonna Kyla's gonna look at updating that. Rain barrels go on sale in mid-April. We talked about Safe Streets for All grants, MSB fire alarm monitoring system. Hoping to hire a new public works technician by the end of the month. Still going over the stop sign and traffic management policy with a official traffic map update. And a lot of the engineering stuff is duplicative of the Utilities Commission. So any questions on that?
All right, thanks, Chris.
And then we adjourn.
All right, if there are no comments or questions.
Kyla?
Can I raise my hand quick enough? I don't know if I did that right. I did just want to point out in the director's report, I did mention, and Chris, you did a great job covering everything. Frontier Communications has submitted 7 right-of-way permits to do a large village infrastructure update throughout the village. I am meeting with their construction team tomorrow to discuss the project. There's quite a few comments I have on the right-of-way permit, but it is something that this village board will likely see moving forward. As we had TDS come back in 2019, and there were a lot of hiccups that we're going to work through on the Frontier side.
Right, which is how I got involved in village politics to begin with. So,
well, perfect.
I know. All right. Any other comments about for Public Works? Okay, otherwise we'll move on to Plan Commission. Plan Commission met on Wednesday, February 11th at 6:30. We approved our meeting minutes, and we had one item on the agenda, which is also on our village board agenda for tonight, and that was discuss and consider a request from Dave Hensiak of New Tech Golf Carts for an approval of a conditional use permit to allow an outdoor display incidental to indoor sales land use at 645 Sandpiper Trail. Thank you to Aaron, who worked with Dave on this to come up with kind of a solution. So the proposal from the beginning was kind of golf carts galore, and we have it now kind of pared down to a particular spot on the west side of his property by the retention pond, where he can put about 6 golf carts there, and he knows the sign ordinance, and so this was approved by the Plan Commission and now is for discussion tonight, and all of those items are linked in the agenda tonight as well. If you have any questions, either myself or Aaron can try and answer those for you. Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Okay, so I'm looking at the document, the plan view that shows. So you said 6 golf carts. It doesn't say that in the narrative. It shows a green box to the west of the pond, which is within the building setback line, which kind of meets all of our criteria, right? But
Yes.
you said 6. Is that going to be included, that there's only going to be 6 versus 14, or?
I think it's what can fit in that area, which is about 6. Aaron, if you're on, and you can jump in and correct me. And it's golf cart only, so no other businesses from that area or from that complex would put things out. And there's also the Plan Commission did remove the time frame as well. So initially it was kind of like April 1st to October 31st. But we felt like there didn't need to be a restriction on that based on what he was using it for.
Well, but he had said that he wouldn't display carts or golf carts during the winter anyway. So I struggle with why we wouldn't put constraints on that, because you get into certain times of the year, the ground can get soft. It can be, I mean, the bottom line is he didn't really care, and why would we not provide some constraints as it relates to the winter months?
I think his answer was that he would be removing them when it freezes anyway, because the battery can't sit out. But if the board feels like we want to add that back in, that's something that can happen as well.
Yeah, I personally think we should, particularly in the sense that Dave was okay with it. It provides kind of some complementary context where we collaborate on it. I mean, the other thing that I had some concerns about is, this is our main thoroughfare coming into town. And Aaron did a nice job kind of going through where this would potentially cause issues, and none of them really, other than the aesthetics. And that's where I have my concern is so if he's going to be putting carts out there for weeks on end, because the use permit does not say that he can only have them there for during the day or at night. It does whatever he wants to do as long as they're secure. But what I get concerned about is if he has his mowing service come in and mow, and then you've got grass growing up around him, and then he lets them sit there for 2 weeks before he moves them, and now all of a sudden we've got something that's left. I don't think he'll do that, but I would think that the document should reflect that when the property is mowed, that it needs to be mowed completely instead of around the carts.
And Aaron, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, that would be fine with me. I mean, there is a ordinance in place for the length of grass too, so we'd be covered that way anyway, but certainly that's within the range of the kind of condition you could add. If that would make the board more comfortable, that's certainly fine.
I mean, I think it's an important thoroughfare for the village. You come in, and I think if he's going to have a mowing service in there to make a requirement that the carts are removed so it could be mowed completely instead of around, I personally think that he's not gonna, that's what he would do anyway. But I think to dot our I's and cross our T's and make sure that we're on the same page of what the expectations of the village residents would be for this thoroughfare, allowing him to do the things he needs to do to have a successful business, I think is win-win. So I mean, if the other board members are okay with it, I would like to see that, and I would also like to see the April 1st to October 31st timeframe put back in.
Thoughts from other board members, or nod your head if that's seems.
I think that's fine. He seemed agreeable at Plan Commission, so.
So it would be a motion, and then to include those two additional items, conditions.
There were the two conditions already in the staff report, just specifying that it's for this particular business, not any other business that he has on the site there. That it applies only to the carts and not any other equipment or items.
I'd make the motion to approve as presented with conditions and the conditions of April 1st to October 31st, and the lawn maintenance is consistent under the carts as well. Or I guess I'm okay with modifying that wording if you wanted to capture it better, but
Yeah, I would like to say, and again, I don't want to change your motion, but what I would like to do is have lawn care or lawn maintenance would have to be performed with the carts not in the lawn.
Is that a second from you, Pete and Heidi? Are you okay with that language?
yeah, I guess they could move them back 20 feet and then move them back in the spot. I don't think he has to remove them from the grass totally, but if that's the way you'd like it, that's fine.
So maybe Aaron, you help us with the language. The bottom line is we don't want him mowing around the carts and leaving the carts there for 2 weeks, and you got a heavy growing season, and now you've got, you know, kind of a less than ideal look for the thoroughfare.
We want the lawn under the carts to be consistent with the lawn around the carts.
When the lawn is cut, that it's cut completely.
Yep.
All right,
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion by Murphy and a second by Dahl. Any other discussion on this item? And is Lisa and Aaron, are you clear with what the motion was with the conditions?
Yep, got it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. That was it for Plan Commission. We meet again in March. We can move on to reports from village officers, village attorney.
Nothing to report tonight.
All right, village administrator.
Thanks. Wanted to give a shout out to Trista Taylor and Josh Bennett, who served on their or are serving on their professional association's planning committee for their state conference, Wisconsin Parks and Recreation Association, and they held that conference, and it achieved what I've been told is record attendance. So good for them on that planning effort. And then not mentioned here, but wanted to also give a shout out to Planning and Development Director Aaron Ruth. We hold a little icebreaker before our staff meetings. We do a little bit of trivia, and Aaron's the trivia whiz. So he took first place amongst all of our management team in 2025 trivia, and he's probably going to win in 26 as well. But anyway, happy to take any questions on the tracker or the updates.
Yep, Paula has a question.
Just a couple. So on your memo, you mentioned a meeting with Creed and a phone call with Newman Development. Can you give us a little bit more information on where those stand, please?
Mm-hmm. Creed initially submitted a updated concept, and we met with staff and then met with Creed to go over that. Based on our comments, they made some changes a couple days thereafter, or maybe even the next day, but it was pretty tight to get it back on for the February Plan Commission. So we asked them to wait until March, so they'll be coming in March. Newman called to update that they've had positive discussions with the Banigans, and they're intending to propose some updated pre-annexation draft, updated draft of the pre-annexation agreement terms to our attorneys, and potentially come back in March or April.
Any other questions for Matt? Trista did share with me that there was a Taylor Swift themed breakout session at her conference, which I thought was very exciting, and I'm hoping she can bring that back to the village for us. That was a joke. All right, moving on. Assistant Administrator Finance Director Sawyer with a couple of budget amendments for us.
Yeah, so both these budget amendments are primarily the function of time. So the village is on its fiscal year is also a calendar year, which also corresponds with appropriations. So we might have an ongoing 2025 project that some expenses occur in 2026. So a vast majority of the capital lines relate to shifting costs from one year to the next. We do find some efficiencies and year-end in purchasing of vehicles. So were a couple instances here where we were able to come pretty significantly under a budget on some capital vehicle purchases by buying in December of 25. But then corresponding 26, we want to make sure that we reduce the budget authority in the subsequent year for those purchases. And so budget amendment 2025 -012. The first part of it is just the kind of the park development fund. So kind of some big drivers there is, we had a couple, collected more fees than we anticipated, had a little bit more expenditures on how it was allocated. Then kind of going further on, really saw a huge uptick in room tax revenues in 2025. We were pretty consistent for 2 years around that $140,000 mark, and then all of a sudden jumped up to about $170,000 this year, and that's great. Per kind of the tourism statutes, we do have to remit 70% of that to our tourism agency. So we increased the revenue and then increased kind of the associated expenditures. And then one of the associated expenditures is tied to a post-development kind of grant up until the dollar amount is paid off. And then kind of as we kind of further go down, the stormwater management plan. So that wasn't completed at the end of 25, will be completed here early 2026. So that revenue and corresponding expense is decreased here in the 25, but again, brought back in 2026. And then the rest are capital projects. And then kind of the last two line items here are the TID9. So that we obviously had extended periods of time where we weren't collecting lease rent. You'll see in the 2026 revenue, we have those rent kind of reestablished and kind of corresponding expenses. So I guess it will probably be easier to because this is such, there's a lot of different topics that this budget amendment is, I'll allow the board to ask questions, certainly for either one of these, either 2025 or 2026 amendment.
Questions for Cameron? Otherwise, these are discuss and considers.
Murphy will move approval of 2025-012 budget amendment and 2026-001 budget amendment as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I was having a problem with my controls there. I've got like 12 screens open here. I guess, Cam, if you could walk us through, so a lot of this is pushing expenses from 25 into 26, right? And
yep, so not changing appropriation levels, but changing the year in which that they occur.
Right. So when I rack up 2025-012, it's like a $500,000 reduction in spending in 2025, right? I can't find the tab, but it's a little over 500,000. And then the 2026-001, the reduction in the police station, when I racked at it, you moved the Shady Grove into 2026 and some of the equipment purchases, but it does rack up that there's yet another about $500,000 worth of reduction there. So what is the net impact? Do we really see about a $500,000 worth of reduction in spending in 2026 as it relates to this? And it looks like it's mostly driven by the budget versus amendment on the police station.
So no, the answer is because of how we budgeted in 26, I thought it was the most transparent way to have the full $16.2 million police station. And so what we're doing in this budget amendment is not only decreasing what we spent in 2025, but also decreasing the budget in what we spent in 2024. So the budget amendment, so there was roughly $255,000 in 2024 that was spent, and then $896,000 in 2025. So that's where you're getting that not all of those expenditures were necessarily 25. I will say there were for some of the engineering was a little bit less.
When you budgeted the 16.2, it included a lot of the previous engineering that had already been spent. So essentially, we're reducing the spending as it relates to the budget in 2026 by about $500,000.
Yeah, it's essentially taking the full project. This is what it was, because that's the hard part about governmental kind of budgeting. It spreads so many years. We just wanted to be very transparent. This is where we're starting. Yep, these are the costs, and then we'll probably do another budget amendment in 27 to bring the remaining costs.
Gotcha.
I do plan, as Heidi mentioned and Chris mentioned, I'm going to give the financial updates for the utilities at the next utility commission meeting. It will probably be the the second meeting in March that I'll give an update on the village financials overall, as well as the capital projects, and kind of highlight some efficiencies on where we kind of came under budget on the projects that were completed. And then, Matt and I were also discussing in his updates, as projects close out throughout the year, give a summary of, this is what the project was, this is what it was budgeted, and this is what we came under. So you guys are getting a little bit more of a real-time update as projects complete.
Gotcha. Well, that's good news. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Cameron? All right. Otherwise, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Communication and miscellaneous business. We have to consider approval of vouchers with those listed in the agenda. Comments or questions for Cameron on the bills list?
I guess, Cameron, we had spoke about a lot of these, so thank you very much for providing a response to all the village board members. I guess I still had a question there was two questions. One is the flock, $1,000 to trial run 2 solar cameras. I guess we had approved the flock, that we move forward with the flock. I'm just curious as to where this came from and why solar versus the line powered systems that were installed were even changing course. And maybe that's a question for you, Chief.
Do you mind taking this question, Chief Gary?
Sure. This opportunity came up. The cameras themselves we get a 1-year trial period. I want to see the benefit of them for part of our strategic plan related to traffic accidents and crash high incidence areas. So they're being added, I'll say, just for this year to see the benefit, if they actually show benefit to the village. If not, we have no obligation. And the small investment, I think we're going to get some good returns on it, especially related to some of the investigative information we can get for it related to some of the crashes.
Yeah, I guess the question wasn't the flock. The question was, this trial and solar cameras in incremental cost above and beyond, because we had approved flock before, and now we're evaluating trialing some solar cameras for $1,000. That's the piece I was questioning.
Understand. Again, I'm taking it out of my operational, not out of the capital. And they're going to be placed with current other cameras to give us some additional data.
Yeah, it's less about the data. Are you talking, I mean, solar versus the standard cameras that Flock had provided? I guess the question is why are we looking at solar cameras at this point in light of what we've already installed?
We have solar cameras also. We have both hardwired and solar in operation currently. And this was the model that they had available for the price of $500.
Okay. The other question was TAPCO. I guess what is, man, this is probably a question for you too, Chief. TAPCO, equipment and traffic reporting software. What is that? What does it get? What does it get the community?
So what it is related to when you had inquired about traffic data and Director Laughlin referenced she has a device. You reference our speed message board system. That's the software that's part of that sign system. And we get the data all off of it also, in addition to the ability to remotely program it. And also it helps us with the maintenance of it. So this is a 3-year, basically 3-year commitment that we got with a $700 reduction for doing the 3-year.
So it's $3,800 for a 3-year license.
That is correct.
Okay, so it's not $3,800 a year for 3 years. Okay, very good, thank you.
No problem.
And then the other comment I'd make is Cam and Kyla, thank you for kind of setting up time to meet with Alliant to kind of work through kind of our energy consumption and the response on the meter 163 that you'd provided helps. So thank you. Other than that, I didn't have any other questions, Cindy.
Do you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the bills as presented.
I'll second. Oh,
Paula
can have. I did have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Heidi.
About the pay application to the memo that was submitted. Is that that's part of this package? I don't.
Yeah, so that relates to the police station project, just to provide, again, additional transparency to the community and board, just documenting each pay app. So we didn't hire a construction manager. So we just wanted to highlight the elevated process and review that each pay application goes through as we're kind of going along. So boring updates, the last two. I anticipate as they really get going here in March and April for these to become a little bit more robust, as we kind of go through the review cycle. So it really starts, when we're documenting this pay app review, it really starts with Aaron, Kyla, the attorneys, and Enberg. So they kind of get, the feedback together, talk about the request from Riley. Matt and I then review the comments from that kind of initial review group prior to recommendation to pay at the village board. Again, if there's minor change order requests in here, we would document what those are for the board, just to make sure that we have that level of transparency.
Thank you, and thanks for providing that all the extra eyes and bringing it forward. So appreciate it.
Any other questions on the bills list? Otherwise, there's the motion and seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. I'll move on to correspondence. Anyone have anything? Otherwise, I'll say that Kyla and I had a meeting with a West Lawn resident about the water issue that we had been alerted to I think it was right before Thanksgiving. And so thanks to her and her team, we had a really good meeting with that resident, and we have they already had action items for when the spring thaw occurs and additional flushing, bi-directional with all her motions that she makes. So really appreciate her taking the time to have that conversation with the resident. Other correspondence? What about upcoming community events?
I would highlight two. This Sunday, there's Family Bingo at 1 p.m. at Glacial Drumlin, hosted by the Monona Grove Education Foundation for the weekend snack packs. And then the Cottage Grove Volunteer Fire Department is bringing back their corned beef and cabbage. That is going to be on Saturday the 17th from 11 to 1.
Going to hang out with Aaron and I from noon to 1 on Thursday to learn more about the impact fees and ask questions. That session's virtual. And then again from 5 to 6 at Village Hall. We'll be there. As a reminder that, for community members out there, there is a feedback form that is available on our impact fee kind of landing page. So please, obviously our board members will appreciate, all the feedback that is, presented when making the decision in the second.
And I have one correction, sorry. It's Saturday, March 7th, not 17th. I apologize for the corned beef and cabbage.
And then on, what day is it? Today's Monday, Wednesday, the spring summer guide for Parks and Rec comes out. So you can sign your kids up for all of those things. Still on.
Tomorrow's also election day. Election day
forget
tomorrow if you haven't voted yet.
Any other, I feel like we have a vibrant community. Future agenda items. Thank you again for the direction for fire and EMS. Make sure that everyone's in the loop going forward with that. I'll try and get some information too on when we can expect that survey in your inbox so you don't miss it. The other thing I had written down was visioning, trying to get maybe a little bit more of an update on when we can expect some of that work for whatever the downtown is in Cottage Grove and how we want to move forward with that. And then I don't know if we need a closed session with Rudabush, but making sure that we have really good direction to our consulting partners so they know what their work is moving forward.
And then I had the flat cameras from last meeting. And then also the possible creation of a debt reduction task force.
And I know, Chief, I'm not sure if we'll have flat camera up, and I know you were going to work on that website. And I don't know if that'll be next meeting or maybe the second meeting in March.
I will work with Flock on that to get that up and running.
Any other agenda items? All right. Otherwise, number 11.
Would make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Motion and a second and a third. Non-debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks, everyone.